Hey, it's been a while, and I'm going to be doing something very different here. This is going to be something you're not used to seeing here on my channel. To cut things short, I've been wanting to make a series using Cities Skylines. The idea of this series is to tell a story of a fictional city, built in a fictional place, in a fictional time, and full of fictional events. I don't really care if this video, or even this whole series, gets many views. I just want to make this. This video series was inspired by the various build series by $2.20 and other various creators, but I'd say this series takes more inspiration from the now no longer running series Franklin by Do Not Eat. I'll include links to both of those channels and the series Franklin below if you're interested. I bring it up because it's incredibly similar in scope to what I'll be doing here. If you have any questions about this video, or the series as a whole that I don't answer, please feel free to comment down below and I'll either respond to you there or in the next video if the topic is interesting to discuss. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and this series. Now, onto the video proper. The rocks, the sand, the river and the sea on the horizon. This land is the promised land we sought. When I stood atop that rock and I saw the sun rise from the horizon, it blinded me with its majesty. It was there atop that rock that I called this land my coast. Peter's Coast. Excerpt from the founding of Piotervik. Peter's Coast, which will one day be known as Piotervik, was founded on this man's whim, Peter Morelli, the original king. There is little known about this man, as we only know his name and his exploits through the tales of him carried on through stories passed down through generations. There is famously cave paintings and crude artwork of him and his various exploits through the region. However, they're by his pioneers, the natives, and of course, his group, the ancient invaders. They aren't perfect recreations of what happened, so we have to take everything with a pinch of salt and with a bit of skepticism when it comes to the claims these people made of the area and also of their exploits. We'll get back into some of the history of the area in a bit. I wanted to talk about the actual building of the land and the area. Most maps in City Skylines start with these connections outside of the map. Highways and railroads that obviously didn't exist in the time of cavemen. Or so I hope. So away with that, and also away with an island that I didn't approve of either. I also made sure the textures under the water were the same. It might not look like it right now, but once the water covers different colored areas in the game, it starts to look weird, so I just got rid of it. Oh, and of course, I had to change my little chirpy to the Helmet Man. Might switch it up later. There's a mod that removes it, but he's not as annoying as he used to be back when the game came out, and I kinda like him. Also, water physics in this game is really bad, so if you make changes to any of the coastlines, it can cause massive tsunamis. So you just have to let it even out eventually, before you do anything else. I wanted to change the time as well, to represent what year roughly these episodes would be set in, but I realized that system wouldn't work. Since the calendar of this world runs on an 8-day week, with 35 days in every month, and 13 months in a year, that system wouldn't work. And years are also grouped into eras, which are based off of the evolution of the calendar through history. The nil era was before the calendar was invented, which is where we're at now. Years here, much like the BC years, go backwards. The estimated time these events occurred in roughly sit around 700 nil era to 600 nil era. The population varies a lot in this time and we'll go into that now. Before King Peter and his pioneers came to the coast, it was controlled and inhabited by a collection of orcish tribes. Before Peter and his people found this land, the native tribes numbered less than 1,000 here. The tribes were all around the woods and ranges of the land, but most important was the holy and culturally significant Boulder Island. You would have seen before the fort-like town built around the boulder. Mind you, everything you've seen so far is actually before King Peter even arrived. Peter Morelli, despite not being present, is so important to the story, we have to mention him before we even mention the natives he killed to conquer this land. Yeah, I've been alluding to it. King Peter wasn't the greatest. He and his pioneers, or actually, his soldiers, conquered the lands the orcs call home. Peter brought with him somewhere between 50 to 200 men, as historical debates here vary depending on which accounts you believe. Stories and cave paintings show all sorts of numbers, but the important part that everyone agrees on is how Peter was able to conquer the orcs despite being heavily outnumbered. King Peter was able to make the sky rain fire. Not with arrows. He was able to spawn deadly fires from thin air. Magic. At first, it was believed that the tails were just a fancy way of saying arrows on fire, but the invention of fire arrows came later, several hundred years later in fact. So how did historians jump to magic? That is another story that we will go over much later in the series, but just understand magic was practiced in these times. In its simple and crude form, it was at best used to cast balls of fire from the sky, and could heal small cuts and diseases. Once King Peter had defeated the orcs and subjugated them to his own rule, he would build the lands in his own people's image, though we'll be getting to that in the next episode. I had the thought of making these really long episodes, like an hour or more, but I want to upload these regularly and keep my sanity, so I'll be keeping them relatively short. I do aim to release these episodes once a week or fortnight depending on if I have the time available. Every episode I'll do will also have a little population, event, and time update each episode. I'll throw it in whenever it makes sense, or as a summary to the video. So the year is 700 to 600 Nil era, population approximately 1000, early antiquity, native orc tribes are the sole populations of the area. I just wanted to get that out of the way while it was convenient. And what you've been seeing on screen for the past few minutes in the time-lapse, I'll explain now. So I initially had an image for Piotervik. I wanted 2 of the 3 sides to this land to have mountainous and hilly areas. I didn't want to add a stream yet, though I do plan to add some small streams in with a waterfall up somewhere in the mountains. I just don't have the time for it right now. So now, and knowing the game's own water physics, this can be a struggle. And at this point, this has been over 10 hours of work in this area, from researching, curating mods, troubleshooting, and eventually editing and working on the land. Most of this footage is actually sped up 300, 400, even 500% speed. I also really like the way the mountains came out. They have a texture and shape to them that looks convincing, and though I hide it up later with some nice trees, it's the idea that later on, when I remove these trees, the terrain will look really good. Also, just as a small extra, I redid Boulder Island at the end of this clip, mostly because it was very small, and I knew I'd need more space to build on later, and it was just a lumpy turd in the river with no character. Though I gave myself a lot more room than I probably needed, I will need it much later in the future. And here's those trees I was talking about. I actually made 2 groups of flora, one for the mountains and another for lower elevations, since I wanted to change from dense mountainous woodlands to more open plains and wider woods below. My only regret here is that I feel I was too open with the forests outside of the mountains. I looked at it and it felt too open, but then again this won't last very long. From a distance, it gives off exactly the kind of look I was hoping for. I spent a lot of time here working on the woods, plains, and area of Piotervik, something like 2 hours alone on just the trees. It's very important that I put in the right amount of detail. I feel like I was on the right track here. Though there was an issue. The game has an inbuilt limit to the number of props and trees you can place, and I hit it with this. At one point, the forest I was editing actually wouldn't work, so I had to get a mod and fix that, which was one of the smaller issues I had to fix in the opening episode. Yeah, there was an initial bug these mods had with the game to begin with that was the source of an hour-long bug fixing and troubleshooting campaign. That was a frustrating part that I know now won't crop up again in the series, meaning I might be able to get more done in every episode after. I want to get a lot done in every episode I do, and I want to keep things unique, interesting and varied from episode to episode, moving in and out both in the construction and development of the series, as well as the in-world development, how events unfold and change as the city grows. For instance, this episode I still want to get more in depth about the orcs because this isn't going to be the only episode they feature in. In fact, they're going to come up a lot. These orcs call themselves the Tor Riverland clans. The river that the city sits on is called the River Tor, hence the name. The word Tor is actually orcish for clay. River is an abundant source for clay, as the river here was once a lot higher in the past, making many of the shores rocky clay outcrops. Orcs, unlike the more mainstream idea, are not barbaric or even incredibly violent people. They're known to be territorial, especially to foreign races such as humans, dwarves, and halflings, but are overall non-violent. Just for reference, humans actually come from the west, dwarves from the north, and halflings from the south, so the orcs find themselves in the conflict of many groups' interests frequently. At this point in time, the earliest human societies were forming thanks to their early adoption of magic, propelling them forward despite their lack of technology. The orcs, by comparison, were still hunter-gatherers, and were yet to discover agriculture. They could construct tools, weapons, homes, and the like, often creating large log halls to store their food, or to hold large assemblies. Orc lifestyle, culture, and even the way they govern themselves is very similar to the Greek city of Athens. Complete democracy, with their leaders being elected by votes, chosen to decide what would be voted on, and then how to carry those requests out. Orcs are naturally democratic by nature, and had an early form of law and order whereby the tribe vote on the outcome based off an event with two opposing sides. However, in orcish culture, if no one objects to the actions of a crime, then it is deemed justifiable and honourable. For instance, if an orc murdered the most hated person in town in front of everyone, there would likely be no repercussions for their actions or even a vote, since no one would defend the life of the now dead orc. So in orcish culture, being accepted and popular is very important, leading many orcs to work hard to be accepted and liked by the other orcs. An orc who pulls in enough fish to feed several families, and gives his spare fish away, will always have a place in the tribe. But orcs that waste their time and don't help aren't liked and excluded from the tribe. The tribe's leader will call a congregation once a fortnight to vote on a few things, and occasionally call emergency congregations for crimes, banishments, and other pressing issues. The tribes of the Tor Riverlands are not stray groups either. The roughly 1,000 orcs that make up the tribes are allied with one another, and 3 times a year go to the grand congregations held at Boulder Island. For now, I won't really be going into the details of the conquering of Peter's Coast. I'll leave that for the next episode because at this point, the video is already over 10 minutes long. As I'm editing this video, I'm starting to realize it might go all the way up to half an hour, so my words from earlier are probably starting to become a little ironic now, having aged like fine milk. I had the thought of making these really long episodes, like an hour or more, but I want to upload these regularly and keep my sanity, so I'll be keeping them relatively short. Just as a quick tidbit as well, the way I'm making this video is by writing the script while editing the video at the same time. I prefer working this way and will probably keep doing this in the future, but I might have to plan things out differently to accommodate this. It's already making my script flip-flop all over the place. I'm on the fence about it at the moment. On one hand, it lets me be sporadic and mix things up as I want to. It gives me a lot of freedom. But then again, a planned out script from the start might be a lot easier to follow. I'll definitely need your opinion on that, so if you've stuck around to here and you have an opinion, I'd like to hear about it. Speaking of more meta parts of this episode, the name I gave this episode I feel is really important. Not only is the land of Piotervik new horizons for King Peter and his people, but it's also new horizons for myself and for this channel. I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was the perfect title. I'm just going to jump ahead here, since I want to talk about the camps and building them. These roads I'm using are part of the Park Life DLC, and I want to use stuff already in the game, or as part of the DLC already in the game where I can, but only if it works. Since nothing really looks like an ancient log hut or cabin, I had to go and find the appropriate assets on the Steam Workshop. I was having trouble with the game and these new modded assets, but in the end, I prevailed and we have nice orc huts. I also made sure to include a well in each town, something that the orcs of a tribe would congregate around during leisure hours, drawing water to drink over conversations and festivities. Water is actually a big part of orcish religions and culture. It's seen as the lifeblood and spirit of the world. Drinking water is actually seen as the point in which the soul enters the body. Once a child drinks water for the first time, they gain their soul. This is usually at the age of around 4 to 5 years, and any time before then, if the parents wish to disown a baby, it is not seen as immoral, since in the eyes of orcs, babies who have not sipped from the earth's essence are soulless and little more than dogs. This rarely happens, and only when children show signs of deformities, ill health, weaknesses, or the family and or tribe cannot support the growth of another orc. At this point, this one episode alone has taken up to 3 weeks of editing and filming, and based on that and the length so far, I think I'll actually start wrapping things up. I genuinely loved working on this episode, and I am itching to start working on the city even more. So the next time, I plan on expanding out these orcish camps even more, but also going over the occupation of the region, showing how King Peter's people influenced these camps. I'll also be adding farms, plantations, slavery, and a lot more to come. I expect that the next episode may actually be longer than this one, since I have so much planned for it. Thank you guys for watching. It means a lot to me that even a few people watch and enjoy this. If you do want to see more on this, I really encourage you to like, subscribe, and all that jazz if you haven't already. All the music used in this video is linked below with timestamps and more information. If you have any questions, comment them down below as well, and I'll see you next time.